I'm Dave with Hamilton Motor Company. Today we're going to be installing this Hamilton Motor Company Apple CarPlay and Android Auto conversion kit in this 2013 Lexus RX. Our brand new screen is going to integrate into the factory system, providing this vehicle with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto while saving all of the factory features. We're based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we sell replacement screens and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto upgrade kits for almost every model of Lexus and Toyota. Feel free to reach out at our tech support team at 919-858-2890 if you have any questions about a kit for your Lexus. Let's begin. To begin, we're going to use a 10mm socket to loosen and disconnect the negative battery terminal. This will power off the vehicle. Inside the vehicle, we're going to start by removing this door sill trim, and then we're going to work our way up and towards the center console. Reach under this one with your hands and pop it loose. You'll feel the clips free themselves. If you break one or two of these clips, don't worry. These are the most delicate of the Lexus clips I've dealt with, since they get exposure to the constant hot and cold, but you can get cheap ones to replace these on Amazon. The next step is to remove this trim panel here. Use a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen the plastic screw. And with the plastic screw fully removed, you can reach under this panel and pop it loose. Set it in a safe place. Keep in mind there are a couple clips that also hold this on, so it may be a little bit tight. Next, we're going to remove this trim panel here. Use a credit card or a trim pry tool to reach between this crevice, create a little room, and then you can simply reach your fingers under and pop it free. Make sure that all your clips stayed in place. We'll set this aside. Next, we need to pop this trim panel loose to access two screws. Reach behind it, this trim panel with the buttons, and apply some forward pressure. It will come down here. You're going to have one wiring harness, don't be afraid, that was unconnected already from the factory in a lot of vehicles. You don't need to worry about that one. Go ahead and disconnect all of these wiring harnesses, and we'll set this trim piece aside. Now, something to note. When you get ready to test your vehicle, once you've installed the CarPlay system, if all of these connections that were connected from the factory are not reconnected, it will cause your system to glitch. So before testing your system, make sure absolutely everything in this car is reconnected. It won't cause any long-term damage, but this car is a little bit finicky about wanting everything reconnected for the sound system to work. We need to reach down and pop loose this flap of plastic from the side here. With this plastic popped down, you'll be able to access a screw from this side. Here is what the flap looks like as it pops down from the front. And there'll be a Phillips head screw to remove in this direction. Okay. This is the piece of plastic that folds down, and we will be accessing a Phillips head screw concealed behind it in this direction. Use your Phillips head screwdriver and remove this screw here at the bottom right corner of the trim panel. Remove the Phillips head screw. Finally, start unscrewing. There is a Phillips head screw under the lower trim panel. Unscrew it and remove it. Under the steering wheel, almost against the center console, there is another 10mm screw to remove. With the screws removed on either side, bend down on this lower trim panel and identify this center clip. Press it, and you can let this black piece drop down here. With these two Phillips head screws removed, reach into the large panel under the steering wheel and disconnect it. There will be 3 wiring harnesses to release. One right here. Remove these 2 additional wiring harnesses between the steering wheel and the center console. With all the harnesses removed, set this panel aside. Next, grip the gear shift and thread it counterclockwise to unscrew it from the vehicle. Set it aside in a safe place. It is now time for us to remove the center console cover. You're going to either want to make sure your vehicle is in neutral now, or when you pop this loose, we'll show you where the button is to knock your vehicle in neutral. Use a rag to protect your fingers, and start along the seam, working from the back forward to free the center console cover. If your vehicle is not in neutral, there is a button at the top here you can push to switch the gears between neutral and park without having to power on your vehicle. With the center console loose here, we can go ahead and disconnect these wiring harnesses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we'll be able to set the center console in the passenger seat. With the center console cover removed, we're now going to remove this trim panel here. I'm going to use a rag to protect my hand, and I'm going to reach in and I'm going to pull back and towards the passenger side. This trim panel is a bit on the tougher side to remove. Once you have it pulled, set it aside. There's a trim panel between the center console and steering wheel right here. We're going to grab this one and pull away towards the driver's door. Free this and set it aside. Inside this square here is a 10mm bolt that we're going to need to remove. There's going to be one on either side of this central control unit. For this one here, you must have the glove box open, otherwise your socket won't fit directly on it and you'll feel like it's a larger bolt than 10mm and it'll confuse you. You got to have the glove box open. We highly recommend using a deep 10mm socket here, but you don't have to if you have the glove box open. So we've got a deep 10mm here with a little extension, and we're going to go ahead and free this one. The driver's side 10mm is going to be accessible through this hole that was covered by that panel we removed. We've got the deep 10mm socket, and once again we're simply going to back that bolt right out. Now give a little bit of care not to drop these bolts as you get them loose. That being said, if you do drop one of these bolts down in there, it will settle in a place that it will never rattle, and you really don't need both of them. So don't worry if you do. We can also show you how to get another bolt, but try your best not to drop one in there. We are now going to remove the trim piece surrounding the factory screen. You can use a credit card or a pry tool to get under this lower seam. Also, you can kind of reach between the back seam and pull it forward. You may consider using a lightweight towel to protect your fingers while you do this, but you'll work your way around both sides, freeing both of these clips. And just like that, we'll take this trim piece out and we'll set it aside. We are now going to remove the 3 Phillips head bolts. You can either use a socket with a socket wrench or a long Phillips head screwdriver. And with the 3 bolts removed, we'll reach in, pop the screen loose, and you drag it out from the bottom. Underneath it, there'll be a blue and black wiring harness. Press the tab down and disconnect both of these. And set your factory screen aside. For the next step, we're going to take out 2 10mm bolts. They're through this hole and through this hole, and you can see the angle of this socket wrench. You can use a flashlight to shine in there. You'll get a visual on it. There's only one potential bolt that it could be. We recommend using a deep 10mm socket and an extension. These bolts are in there rather tight. So what I do, I take a light on my phone, I shine it in there, I locate the bolt, and then I just line up my socket with the bolt. When you feel that bolt get to the end, just flip it vertical and lower it out just like that. And by having it vertical, the bolt won't fall out of your socket. So we're now removing the one on the driver's side also with that 10mm deep socket and extension. As it gets loose, you'll be able to simply flip your socket wrench in a more vertical position. With the bolts removed from either side, we'll grip the factory head unit from the bottom and the top, and we'll apply a little bit of pressure on each side and free it from the console. There are going to be a few harnesses to disconnect behind it. Now we've made sure to cover this gear shift with a towel to keep it safe. We're going to start from the most accessible ones. We'll remove these connectors. Now every connector only fits on one way, so you don't need to take a picture or anything like that. We're just going to go ahead and remove every single connector from the back of the harness, or from the back of the unit. There are not many. For this large harness, this is the large power harness, you're going to reach in and there's a little tab you're going to pull to lift up on a gray metal bar, a gray plastic bar. I'll show that in just a second a little better on the camera. Now this gray harness here, these are on all the Lexus and Toyota units, and these are definitely the hardest ones to disconnect. Sometimes what I like to do, I'll pull out a credit card or a little metal screwdriver just to help me disconnect the tab. Now we've disconnected all the harnesses on this unit. We're going to set it aside in a safe place where it won't get scratched up. This was the bigger gray power connector I was talking about. And to remove this, you can see there's this little tab in here. You just grab that with your fingernail. You'll grab it with your fingernail and lift up on this bar. We're going to remove the 3 screws. There's one here. There's one currently concealed by the steering wheel, and there's one underneath the column. We're going to remove these 3 Phillips head screws to locate a wiring harness. Now, we have done this slightly out of order. It is usually better to complete this step before removing anything from your vehicle. There's one more identical Phillips head screw on this side of the steering wheel. And the final one is located right here under the steering wheel. Okay. And with that one removed, we'll be able to power the vehicle off and access the wiring under the steering wheel. With the 3 screws removed, we need to separate, like this, the 2 pieces of plastic trim behind the steering wheel. There's a seam, and it'll separate right on the seam. These pieces of trim can be rather tight the first time it's done. Reach from the back and pull down and out firmly, and you'll see the front and back begin to separate. These pieces of plastic are very strong. With it separated, we'll remove the bottom piece of trim. You can see these are the clips that were holding it in place. We'll set it aside. We can leave the top piece of trim in place. We're going to take these 2 T's with what I call the Halloween colors, the orange, the blue, and the black, and we're going to take them from this center cavity. We're going to chase them through this hole so that they can be under the steering wheel, and we'll show you where they connect in just a second. These 2 T's look just like this, and here we go. Make sure you go through this back socket here. And just like that, we've got them in spot and ready to install. Look at this harness T here. You're going to have, if you have the 12 to 15 version, your 09 side will be taped off. This would be for the 2009 to 2011 RX. We're going to be disregarding that. You also have this little wire labeled 12 ES. The ES and RX from this generation share the same harness. This one is not going to be used. So you want to verify 14 RX is connected to 14 RX or 12 ES here. And then we're going to focus on this little T labeled 14 RX. It's going to have what we call the Halloween colors, the orange, the black, and the purple. We're going to disconnect a harness from under the steering wheel. This harness is really concealed, and we'll show it to you in just a minute. We're going to disconnect it from under the steering wheel. We're going to plug it into the female side, and we're going to plug the male side back under the steering wheel. We're going to remove this black harness that is tucked under the steering wheel. It's going to plug into the Hamilton side. And we're going to plug the Hamilton side back into the original socket. This car is the mouse version. It has the mouse that rocks forward, backwards, and side to side. We're going to take this harness labeled 14 RX ES mouse. It has the green and black wires. And we're going to feed it from the center cavity. We're going to feed it behind the black plastic shift assembly. And we're going to feed it into the main cavity down here. This one is going to plug into the female white harness. And this one from the Hamilton harness will reconnect into the factory unit. So the Hamilton female is intercepting the factory vehicle, and the Hamilton male will go back into the unit. Next, we're going to take this harness labeled aux. And we're going to feed this harness in the same manner. We're going to go behind the black plastic shift assembly. I'm going to take this harness into the center console. We've got this small harness labeled aux, and we're going to be plugging it into the aux jack here. Most folks, and the best way to do this is to take a drill and drill a small hole and run it through here, so that when you cover it with this piece, it will never even be seen. In this car, we're simply going to run it over here for the time being, but there are plenty of solutions, either drilling a small hole here, or you can drill a small hole here and run it through this channel so that this aux port is completely concealed. We're going to be taking the harnesses, this is the primary power harness here, this thin tan one, as well as this harness labeled RX-ES high monitor, and we're going to be routing them from the center cavity here up top. The thin tan one is going to be the primary power harness for the new display, and the one labeled high monitor is going to plug into the original black connector that was connected into the back of the factory screen. And we'll grab this one labeled RX-ES high monitor. You can see this is the original black connector. We're going to plug this one into the one labeled RX-ES high monitor. This tan one is just going to hang out up here for now. We only have a few harnesses left to connect here. This one labeled speaker, a lot of folks ask us about this. Do I have to connect to the speaker? What does the speaker do? I'll tell you. You don't have to connect to the speaker. We're going to connect to the speaker here for this customer. The speaker, our unit will play music and navigation via the aux channel. What the speaker would allow you to do is to mix navigation, say like Apple Maps, in with your FM radio. So if you want to be listening to FM radio and have it be able to play navigation, you'll want this speaker and you'll just simply set it back here behind the central control unit. There are a couple other harnesses here that are not used. For example, 360 control is taped off. As well, there's one labeled OBD CAN. That one is not going to be used on this vehicle. Anything that is taped off will not be used on this vehicle. We'll go ahead and plug all of the wires back into the main unit that we removed, starting with that large power, this one on top. Once again, these all fit just like a jigsaw puzzle. There will not be a situation where you have a harness plugged into the wrong slot. We'll continue here. Now we're showing you how to wire everything back up here. What we strongly recommend you do, and what we're going to do here, before buttoning everything up for a final run, we're going to plug in everything in a rough-in capacity, and we're going to test every function of the vehicle. And what this will allow you to do, this tiny white one's going to plug in at the very front here. What this will allow you to do is, if something is going wrong, you can contact our support team and we can help you before you've got everything reconnected. Once you've got everything reconnected, it can be pretty frustrating to take it all apart. So we're going to plug in that final little white one. We're going to resume with plugging in everything on this lower panel. Now, like I said, we're just plugging in everything to test it at this stage. You may wonder why we have to connect everything to test it. This RX is a very temperamental generation about one thing. In order for the audio to function properly, in order for all the features to function properly, this car really does want everything plugged back in. So make sure you're not even missing one single connection. This car is really temperamental about wanting everything connected. So make sure you're not even missing one single connection before you test it. If you'll recall, this gray one was plugged into this blue, and these blue sockets are dud sockets, meaning they're not used on this vehicle. If yours is used, it's for an option. Make sure it's plugged back in. The white was unused on this vehicle also. So we're just gonna let this hang down here for just a moment, and we're gonna go ahead and apply power to the vehicle. We're gonna test our new system, and we're gonna see if the steering wheel controls work. We're gonna see if the backup camera works. We're going to test the audio as well as the microphone. We wanna make an important note. This blue wire starts down here and it comes out up here. This is called the LVDS wire, and it carries the video signal from your factory unit to the new unit. This wire is notoriously a little bit difficult to connect in here. It goes in easy, but it has a little bit of a loose fitment. If when you have the radio installed at the end, your backup camera is not working, or your original side is not showing up, on this vehicle in front of your mouse there's a menu button. Long holding that menu button will toggle between that original interface and the new Hamilton interface. If when you do that you're getting a gray screen or a black screen, you need to manipulate this wire. Sometimes we even recommend putting a little bit of tape under it to make sure it gets a snug fit. This wire connects in here, and it's very important to make sure this wire has a good fit in order for the system to work properly. You can see how this fit is a little bit loose, and making sure after you test it you've got that factory side working, adding a little bit of tape and making sure this is snug is very important. We're going to install this two-part bracket. It's going to start with this metal piece, and then we're going to follow up with this plastic piece here in order to get the new head unit a bit closer to the passengers, because it is a touchscreen unit. So for this device, we're going to have this metal bracket. There's going to be a few little locator tabs, one on either side. Make sure those are located in their sockets, and then we're just going to line up these screw holes here. Now, leave it a little bit loose until you have all three in, and then we'll come and we'll tighten them all three together. And we're tightening the screws now with each of them installed. This bracket will firm up. It's important you do this as a last step. The reason being, this bracket will provide so much rigidity in the upper dash here that it becomes difficult to fit the wiring harnesses through if they're not already through. So you'll want to make sure that they are behind the bracket, and then the wiring harnesses you will need, being this blue one and your power harness, are coming through the bracket. We'll follow the same philosophy here, where we'll put the screws in a few turns. We're using a long Phillips head for this. You don't want to tighten any one screw down, as we need a little bit of flexibility in the system to get the three plastic legs all screwed into the bracket. Using a strong long Phillips head screwdriver, you'll be able to have a little bit of control over the legs as you maneuver them into place. And just like that, we'll make sure the bracket is secure. We're going to start in the upper cavity, and we're going to feed the USB port around and into the lower cavity. From here, we're going to locate the hole from that access panel and simply feed it from the back and through that hole. We have routed it from the back of the central cavity into the glove box here, and you can see we can either reinstall the panel like this, and you'll never really be able to notice it from your position where you see it, and it can hang out here. To do it fully 100% correctly, it's best to drill a small hole here, and that way there, when you press this panel back into place, it'll be able to snap fully into place. But there's nothing wrong with doing it this way, and plenty of folks do it this way. The only other connector we're going to use from this accessory harness is the one labeled mic. Now, wherever we can in our vehicles, we like to preserve the factory microphone, and we do this on all newer Lexuses. However, if you consider that 2015 is now a 10-year-old vehicle, the best situation you'd be dealing with is a 10-year-old microphone. So on the 2009 to 2015 vehicles, we do have to add an aftermarket microphone, and we include this with every single unit. It'll connect right here. This microphone is for Bluetooth calls as well as Siri. And what you can do here, you can run this microphone in a few different places. You can either run it down through the dash and have it come out below the steering wheel. Alternatively, you could route it back up in here and hide it behind your new screen, or you could route it somewhere into your center console. In this case, we're going to route it and connect it below the steering wheel. So I'm going to start the microphone down here, and I'm simply going to run this wiring harness back around the steering wheel, back up into the center cavity here. And I'm going to run it back around the back of this thing. And as we close up the plastic panels, we'll show you where we position the microphone. All these other yellow RCAs, as well as this SIM tray, will remain unused. We'll simply tuck them back here into the back of the screen, and we will organize these wires and we'll proceed with the installation. We can tuck the accessory harness back into the dash. The only harness we will be using on the accessory is the USB and the microphone. Now we have the power, the USB, and our blue LVDS out on top. Now the final thing before we install the screen, we're going to take this GPS with the royal blue wire, connect it to the back here, and this will simply tuck into our upper cavity here. You don't need to put this anywhere special. Well, that GPS will be used for weather apps and setting time based on your GPS, so if you ever drive between time zones, it'll change automatically. Then we'll go ahead and connect the blue LVDS wire, as well as that long tan power wire. And with that connected, we'll tuck the wires behind the new mount. We'll line the screen up on this new socket and push it down on either side until you hear either side click. With the screen tested and everything working, we'll tuck the wires back into the central cavity, line the central control unit back into its place, and snap it on either side. It'll fit very flushly with the screen. We will now reinstall the two 10mm bolts on either side of the factory head unit, behind the factory head unit. Here is shown installing the lower bolt behind the factory head unit. There are two on each side. And we're installing the lower bolt on the driver's side of the factory head unit. There are two on either side. We are now going to install the trim panels on either side of the central control unit. This one will simply slot into place over here on the driver's side. Install on the passenger side. You'll line up the clips with the contour of the trim and snap it into place. We wired this up very quickly last time as we were about to test it, so I'll give you an overview. We have this front white connector put back into place. This is the Hamilton male going into the mouse assembly. The Hamilton female plugged into this side. We call this harness the Easter harness. And this one has the purple and the yellow and the blue. And then coming to the back here, we have this black one connected, as well as this smaller one up here. And then finally, the heated seats are plugged back into place. Some people make the mistake of trying to plug the heated seats into one of the harnesses up here, or into that harness that goes under the steering wheel. The heated seats will never be used for anything other than heated seats. Now, with the trim panels in place, tuck the wires below the center console. Line the center console up into its original socket. And we will gently snap the center console back into its place. Getting close to the end here, we will go ahead and tuck the Hamilton harness into this trim panel underneath the steering wheel. And make sure that it snaps into place. Now the key with any of these, you want to make sure that the plastic clips would hold it on their own, even without the assistance of the metal screws. Now of course we will add the metal screws, but you want the system to look entirely normal. And we'll do this one as well. Anything plugged into these blue blocks are harnesses that are not used on your vehicle. I'm going to coil up this harness for the microphone. You can use the original little cable tie to make it neat. There's also a white harness. If you disconnected that right over here, Don't forget to plug that back in. We're going to lift this panel back into place. Make sure that no wires are showing. And we're going to snap this whole panel back into its original clips. Now we're going to reinstall a screw here as well. We'll drop this flap again and we'll reinstall the screw here inside this flap. These are both Phillips head screws. We'll reinstall the screw here. As well, we'll flip this flap back down. With this screw installed, we can go ahead and reinstall this trim piece here. And we'll move to complete the installation down here at the bottom. To complete the installation down here at the bottom. We'll start by sliding this trim panel back into its place. And you'll re-secure it with the plastic nut here. Next, this trim panel on the floor. Attach the dash end cover and make sure the weather stripping comes out on top. Take the gear shift knob, place it back onto the gear shift. Place the negative battery terminal back on the battery. Tighten it down. And we'll reinstall the shroud on top of it. And that concludes our installation in the 2012 to 2015 Lexus RX. We'll have another installation video for the 2009 to 2011 RX. If you run into any trouble, you're welcome to give us a call at 919-858-2890. We also have a forum on our website where you can post questions and get answers from our moderators 24/7. Finally, we'll have another video called How to Set Up CarPlay and Get the Audio Working for this car. It'll be linked in the description. We highly recommend you take a look at that video after installing the unit. It'll tell you how to get audio configured the right way the first time. Of course, if you need us, we're here to help. We sell these kits for almost every version of Lexus and Toyota. If you don't see something you need on our website, just give us a call or send us an email.